now to look at what stories are dominating the world's press today. Dipti is joining us, and she's starting with Emmanuel Macron heading to India today.
Yeah, this visit garnering a lot of attention in the French and Indian papers, Stuart. The French president is indeed in India today as a special guest of honor for India's national holiday on Friday, the Republic Day. He's really getting a red carpet welcome from Prime Minister Narendra Modi with a sumptuous palace dinner and a front seat at that military parade. For this opinion writer, who's actually a former Indian ambassador to France, among other countries, it's a win-win situation, this visit. France is searching for strategic autonomy and influence in a global world, and India is continuing its pursuit of a multipolar world. So these two heads of states meeting is really a joining of those goals, those objectives, respectively. For the Indian Express, another Indian paper, this visit from Macron comes at a very troubled time in the world. There are three major geopolitical issues at stake. You have, of course, a war in Ukraine, you have unrest in the Middle East, and you also have the threat of a possible return of Donald Trump to the White House. All of these issues which will certainly influence any discussions between the two leaders.
Yeah, you found the French press a little less adoring of this relationship, Dipti?
Yeah, and far more critical, actually. This is from Le Monde, the French paper, which calls Narendra Modi an ally for Emmanuel Macron, who's coveted, but also kind of an embarrassing is the word they use, an embarrassing ally to have. And this is something that Le Monde reminds us of in its article, that Joe Biden was the original guest of honor for India's Republic Day celebrations, but he declined the invite last year, possibly over tensions with India following the attempted assassination of a Sikh leader on U.S. soil that was blamed on Indian secret services. So Emmanuel Macron was sort of the replacement guest of honor. Le Monde says the incident shows how conflicted the West are in dealing with India, who they see at once as a friend, but also as a foe. La Croix, meanwhile, talks about the fate of its journalist, who's Vanessa Duniac, who's been there for over 20 years, expressing their concern over a deportation order that she's received from Indian authorities. She's essentially been sanctioned for what authorities say is ill-intentioned reporting, critical and ill-intentioned reporting, which threatens peace in India. Back in 2022, the paper reminds us she was stripped of her right to work as a journalist with no justification given. She's now facing deportation after so many years living in India. That is the focus of La Croix today.
British papers now, they're focusing today on comments by the head of the army. This is suggesting the return of military conscription, isn't it, Dipti?
Yeah, words that we've possibly never heard in our lifetime, at least, but it is indeed what Metro is headlining on today. Your country will need you to fight Putin, it says in a headline that might echo headlines of years past. General Sir Patrick Sanders gave a speech to the International Armoured Vehicles Conference on Wednesday, urging what he says is a necessary changing in the mindset where British citizens start to think like troops and are mentally prepared for an all-out war with Russia, even advocating the return of military conscription to boost numbers. In response to those comments, Rishi Sunak was forced to rule out the army draft immediately and play down these suggestions. According to The Telegraph, 10 Downing Street didn't even want his comments to be made public.
Saudi Arabia now seeking to burnish its international image just through a series of lucrative sports deals. But it appears that endless pots of money does not necessarily guarantee actual happiness for the sports stars who've moved to the country.
Well, these followed leaks, Stuart, in the French press that suggested French footballer Karim Benzema was allegedly unhappy in Saudi Arabia and actually really wanted to leave his club there and the country. According to Le Parisien aujourd'hui en France today, other players allegedly share the same feeling. Black gold does not bring you happiness, the paper says rather philosophically in this article. I encourage you also to read this article from the Washington Post today. It was penned by tennis legends Evert and Martina Navratilova, both today penning this article opposing the possible hosting by Saudi Arabia of the WTA finals. They call such hosting a regression, not a progression for women's rights, for the sport in general. I quote, "We did not help build women's tennis for it to be exploited by South Africa," they write, opposing... Saudi Arabia, rather, thank you. Opposing the strict repression of Saudi women's rights in their article.
I think Dipti's got essay written on her script. Finally, from Dipti, some good news in the animal world.
Yes, some good news, Stuart. Indeed, I'm going to be very careful how I phrase my sentences now, so no lapses. Scientists have carried out the first successful in vitro fertilization of southern white rhino. It's a major breakthrough that could help revive the severely endangered northern white rhino species. Essentially, what they did was they attempted to implant a lab-grown northern white rhino embryo into a southern rhino surrogate. It's the last chance at survival for the northern white rhino species. There are only 2 existing animals on Earth. They live in Kenya, and they live under 24-hour protection from poachers. The trial was successful, but it did not bring about a successful pregnancy. Sadly, the surrogate and fetus were killed by infection. But they're hoping to reproduce this type of experiment in the hopes of regenerating the northern white rhino species one day. As it stands, it is severely endangered and essentially, technically, already extinct.
Oh, fingers crossed. Really hope it works. Dipti, thank you very much, Dipti, with the papers for you here on France 24.